Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vācānam pangam langate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Santoshta Samudvotis. We'll resume our discussion, chapter 26 in Canto 3, in which we are discussing, at least in this section, but actually most of the chapter just discusses with Sarga, which is primary creation. So we are at verse 30, and verse 30 is talking about, or this section of verses is talking about the characteristics of intelligence. So as we know, quick recap, the chapter was talking to us about the development of the various elements of the Mahatattva from Pradhan. So the Pradhan in the mode of ignorance, it becomes Ahankar, and then Ahankar in the mode of goodness, it becomes mind, and also manifests the deities that control the senses. And in the mode of passion, it becomes buddhi, it becomes intelligence, and also it becomes the 10 indriyas, the 5 karma and the 5 jnana indriyas. And then finally, in the mode of ignorance, it becomes the panchabhutas, the 5 material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the 5 subtle qualities, the 5 tanmatras, which is smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. So right now, Lord Kapila is describing intelligence, which is essentially ahankar in the mode of passion. So he's talking about the qualities of intelligence, which is doubt. Quality. Well, I have to read the verse first. Sorry about that. So verse 30. Samshayotha viparyaso Nishchaya smritireva cha Swapityuchyate buddhe Lakshanam vritah pratak. Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by the different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. So Prabhupada says that doubt is the most important function of intelligence. And samshaya, which is doubt, it can be the cause of one's emancipation and also downfall. So we know that in the Vedanta Sutra, it is said that one's spiritual life begins with doubt, which manifests as inquiry. So this is the right kind of doubt, which leads to genuine inquiry. So atato brahma jigyasa. Let us now inquire about the nature of the absolute. So that's the kind of samshaya that can lead one to make advancements. And then there is another kind of doubt which can drive one down to the mode of ignorance. So Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4, Agyascha Shadadanascha Samshayatma Vinashyati Nayam Lokasti Naparo Na Sukham Sanshayatma. So he says Agyascha Sanshayatma cha, that people who are ignorant, and Sanshayatma, people who are doubtful. Vinashyati. They are destined for vinash, destruction. Nayam Lokasti Naparo. nor in this world, nor in subsequent world. Na sukam sanshayatma. Especially the one who is doubting. So Krishna is a little bit kinder to the ignorant. And Prabhupada explains that ignorant are like sleeping. So they're ignorant, but if you shake and wake them, they get up. Samshayatma, at least the false kind of doubting, they are the ones who are pretending to sleep. So you shake them, but because they're not really sleeping, but pretending to sleep, they will not get up. So these are the doubts that are put by the pseudo-intellectuals, by people who demand empirical proof. So both these kind of doubts are the symptom of intelligence. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that false knowledge or viparyaya, doubt or vikalpa, sleep or nidra, and memory or smritya, they're all the symptoms of intelligence. So one might say, how can sleep be a symptom of intelligence? So it's not really a symptom, but it is closely linked to intelligence. And empirically, we have seen that if you go for long without sleep, our intelligence becomes clouded. Our ability to make decisions, our ability to comprehend, that becomes clouded. And others are more clear. Praman and vipraya, that's the two symptoms, correct knowledge and false knowledge. Then vikalpa is the doubt, and smritya is memory. So unlike what people say that once you take to the path of spirituality, it demands blind obedience. Spirituality within itself, it demands questioning. It demands questioning, it demands inquiry, it demands doubt. In the Isopnishat, it is said that that only by the process of knowledge and they just say nations is ignorance or doubt, that only when these two processes are followed side by side can one transcend the cycle of birth and death. Because if one takes to a process without first doubting it, then it becomes blind faith. And blind faith is the most dangerous kind of faith. At one end, it will result in fanaticism because they don't really have any basis for the faith. So it is just because, and that becomes fanaticism. And at the other end, it may become very volatile. That because there is no basis of that faith, today it is reposed here, tomorrow it is reposed somewhere else. So both ways it is fickle. Okay, so that was the qualities of intelligence. Now in verse 31, we will talk about the next evolution. Tejasya indriyaneva kriya jnana vibhagashaha pranasya hi kriya shakti buddhir vijnana shaktita. Egoism in the mode of passion produces two kinds of senses. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses of action. The senses of action depend on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depend on intelligence. So previously we were talking about the function of, or one of the results of egoism and passion, which is intelligence. Now this verse talks about further results of ahankar and tamogun, which is the two kinds of senses. So what are the two kinds? These are the Gyan Indriyas and the Karma Indriyas. And we have 5 of each. So Lord Kapila, he uses the word eva. that Tejasya Indrani Eva. Eva means certainly. And he's using the word Eva to dispel any doubts that the Gyan Indriyas are a symptom of the mode of goodness. Generally, we consider Gyan to be goodness. So Gyan Indriyas are the knowledge acquiring senses. That by the eyes we see, by the nose we smell, by the ears we hear, by the tongue we taste, by the skin we touch. So these are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. And here he is clearly saying that they are a result of ahankar in the mode of passion. Now, in addition to that, there are 5 working senses, the 5 karmendriyas, and these are the hand, the legs, the tongue, the anus and genital, hand, leg, tongue, and yeah, these are the 5 Gyanendriyas. And because one is able to work, the Kriya Shakti, the ability to work comes from Pran. So Pran is the life force. And the Pran is Tejas. The Pran is in the mode of passion. So then we can understand that the Kriya Shakti is in the mode of passion. Now, how do we understand that the Gyan Indriyas are in the mode of passion? So in order to explain that, in the previous verse, Lord Kapila, he had spoken about intelligence, that it has this nature of vikalpa, nidra, in the mode of passion. Now here he says that because these senses are dependent on intelligence, they should be considered to be in the mode of passion. Because buddhi is tejas, and because the gyan indriyas are dependent on buddhi, therefore they should also be considered to be tejas. And Prabhupada said that in this verse, it is clear that both the kinds of senses, the senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses for action, are the products of egoism, which is ahankar, in the mode of passion. Next verse, 32. Tamasakcha vikurvana bhagavad virya choditat shabdamatram abhutasma nabashrotram trushabdagam. When egoism and ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element, sound, is manifested. And form of sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. So in 18 verses, from 32 to 49, Lord Kapila will describe the products of ahankar and tamas. And this we said that ahankar and tamas, it results in the panchabhutas and the pancha tanmatras. So the 5 gross elements and the 5 subtle qualities. So, so Srila Prabhupada says that inspired by the power of Lord in the form of time, Bhagavad Virya. So Virya also means semen, which is why Srila Prabhupada translates it into the energy of the Lord. Virya also means passion, passionate energy, which is the characteristics of time. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he translates to the Lord in the form of time. And the reason Srila Prabhupada translates Bhagavad Virya to sex energy is because all these transformations, they're happening because of the glance of Mahavishnu on Pradhan. So earlier we had seen that in that glance, the jivas enter into the pradhan. And because pradhan is under the control of Maya Devi, Durga Devi, and this glance of Vishnu is basically impregnating the jivas into pradhan, which is under the control of Maya Devi. It is often compared to as impregnation. So we see both the terms being used over here. But ultimately, what the verse is saying is that the ahankar in tamogun now results in the production of dravya. So dravya is dead matter. It is the lowest on the scale of creation. So the first thing that appears is sound. So very often we will see that this point is made that the universe originates from sound. Now, it does not actually originate from sound, but sound is the very first element that appears. So if you consider the universe to be a completely physical manifestation comprising of the 5 gross elements and the 5 subtle qualities of the elements, then that statement is true, that the universe does emanate from sound. But as we are seeing over here, that before this point, we arrive to this point, a lot has happened. That the Pradhan has appeared, it is glanced by Lord Vishnu, it converts to Mahatattva, then under the mode of goodness, mind and the demigods appear, the mode of passion, intelligence, and the Gyan and Karmendya appears. Then in the mode of ignorance, now the matter aspect of the universe is emanating, and the first thing that is emanating is sound. So in addition to the sound, the verse says is that from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. So this is a very interesting way of presenting the evolution of the elements. Generally, what we say is that first the gross element appears, then the quality of the element manifests, then the ability to perceive that quality comes. So one might say that because there is earth, there is the quality of earth is the smell. So because there is earth, there is fragrance, and because there is fragrance, there is the ability to smell. But actually, we see that the Bhagavatam, it turns it around. It says that the first quality that appears is the subtle quality. So the first quality that is appearing is sound. Now, sound is the subtle quality of ether, or it's called sky or ether. Sound is the subtle quality of ether. So because sound is there, ether appears. And because there is sound and ether, the sense of hearing appears. So it's basically emanating from the subtle to the more gross. And the reason that we have senses is because the elements are there. The elements are not there because we have the senses, but because they are the elements, because they have qualities, that is why the senses are there. Prabhupada writes in the purport that in the Vedanta Sutra, it is said that the origin of all objects of material possession, sound is the origin of all objects of material possession. So he's stressing on this fact that it's dravya, material possession. And then sound can also dissolve material existence. How can it dissolve material existence? Anavrita Shabdat, which is liberation by sound. So by hearing Krishna Katha, by chanting the holy name, by listening to the instructions, that which is the cause of our binding can also become the cause of our liberation. So quickly summarizing the points made in verses 15 to 32, and this table is there in the document that I sent. So verses 15 to 18, they talked about time as the 25th element in the Mahatattva, and it is perceived as death. So ultimately, it's perceived as death. We may say that tomorrow I have to do something. I'm busy tomorrow, and that's the more incremental understanding. But ultimately, that's the impact of time, that it takes us to death. Time is also the agitator of the modes of material nature. So the Lord exists internally as Paramatma, and the Lord exists internally as time, Kalo Asmi. 19 to 21 was a discussion of Mahatattva, which is the conversion of Prakriti that has been agitated by time and impregnated by the Jivas. The predominating deity of the Mahatattva is Vasudeva. Then verse 22 spoke about Chitta or consciousness, which is the representation of Mahatattva in the body of the Jiva. So it's because of Chitta we have awareness, and Chitta is distinct from mind and intelligence. That Chitta is just it's just being conscious, being being alive. So it's the most basic level of existence, and Chitta in its pure form, it is Santatvam, serene, Swachham, clarity, clear, and Avikartivam, which is without distraction. So Chitta is what connects us back to the spiritual aspect of our existence. Because other than Chitta, we have Ahankar. Ahankar cannot connect us back, because by very nature, Ahankar is false ego. But at the same time, every Jiva has the ability to make spiritual advancements. So one might say that if Ahankar is like the blindfold that is put on the eyes of a person, then how can you show anything to a blind person? So that's why, in addition to the blindfold of Ahankar, we have Chitta also. We have another eye that if we want, we can invoke, and through that eye, we can see the existence of transcendence. As we make spiritual advancements, we become more and more connected to Chitta. Our consciousness becomes Santatvam, Swachatvam, Avikartvam, serene, clear, and free from distractions. The presiding deity of Chitta is Vasudeva. Then verses 23 to 26 talked about Ahankar or false ego, which is essentially the conversion of Mahatattva under the influence of ignorance. So Ahankar itself then further gets acted upon the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and produces the three effects that we were talking about: Gyan Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. 27-28 was talking about Manas, mind, that Manas is appearing from Ahankar in Satogun, and his characteristics are Sankalp and Vikalp, thoughts and reflections, and his presiding deity is Aniruddha. The presiding deity of Ahankar is Lord Sankarshan. Then verses 29 and 30 was talking about buddhi or intelligence, which is what we discussed just now, which is ahankar and the mode of passion. And its nature is that it helps in determining the nature of the objects, dravya-spuran vigyan. It is the one that supports the gyan indriyas, and it also produces samshaya, doubt, misapprehension, nishchaya, determination, memory, smriti, and sleep. So the presiding deity of intelligence is Lord Pradyumna. And then Indriya or the senses were described in verse 31. And these appear through the influence of Rajogun on Ahankar. And he said there are 10 kinds of Indriyas, 5 Gyanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas. And then verse 32, it spoke about the appearance of the material elements by the influence of tamas on ahankar. That how the material elements like sound, we just discussed sound, we'll talk more later, but essentially how the material elements and the subtle qualities, they evolve by the influence of the mode of ignorance on false ego. Okay. Verse 33. Artha Shaktivam Shabdasya Dastrulingatvam cha Tanmatratvam Chanabaso Lakshanam Kavayo Viduhu. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. So 4 qualities of sound are described here. That sound is used to express meaning, that when we speak, we convey. Sound, it reveals the thoughts of the seer, that unless we speak, we cannot convey what we are thinking. Third is that it reveals the presence of a speaker who may be hidden from vision. So this is a way of saying that, so hidden from vision means that the person may have died, maybe appeared in an ancient time, but still the person is present in sound form. Right? So sometimes when we read books that have been written hundreds of years ago, the author has died a long time ago, but this person is still present in the form of what he has spoken. Also, it means that the person is hidden physically from the view. When the person speaks, then we know there is the presence of the person. And the fourth quality is that it is the subtle form of the ether or sky. That sky or ether is the gross element, and its subtle quality is sound. So, in Prabhupada, in the purport, he talks about how they get further transformed. He says that when we speak of seeing, there must be form. Right? Because what the verse says is that it helps us see the speaker. So what does it mean, seeing? That there must be form. So when we are talking about form, then we are talking about sight. We are talking about vision, and we are talking about fire or light that reveals form. So this is how one element now transforms into the subsequent elements. That will be explained in further verses. Verse 34. Bhutanam chidradartratvam bahirantaramev cha pranendriyatma dishyanatvam nabaso vritti lakshanam. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existence of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. So previous verse talked about sound and said that sound is the subtle quality of ether. So now the verse is talking about the characteristics of ether. So ether is the shelter of pran, the senses, and the mind. So shelter does not mean that it is giving that they're arising from it. It just means that it gives them an opportunity to manifest. It assists them in their manifestation. So for instance, the mind and the senses and the vital force or the pran, they're not visible to the eyes. You cannot touch them, you cannot see them, but we know that they exist. We know the mind exists, we know the senses exist, we know pran exists. So where do they exist? They exist in ether. So this is the understanding that ether is the shelter of the pran, senses, and mind. And mental activities like the psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing, they may manifest later on in activities, but while they are happening, so while somebody is thinking or feeling or willing, so we know that doing is preceded by thinking, feeling, and willing. So thinking, feeling, and willing is the subtle form of doing. So where do they exist? They exist on the platform of ethereal existence. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he gives the example of transmigration, that to show that how ether is supporting. So we know, and this is explained in Bhagavad Gita, that when a soul transmigrates from one body to another, then the subtle body goes, and along with the subtle body, the different conceptions also go with it. So there is no explicit movement of these in any of the other platforms, which means, and I believe that at some point somebody did this experiment, that if they put a dying person within a box that was completely sealed from all sides, they would say that they wanted to see what happened, and nothing happened. The person just died, because it does not rely on air or water or anything else. This happens by its movement in ether. So that's how Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that these elements, they move in ether. Prabhupada said this verse is a potential basis of great scientific research, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from ethereal forms, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, air, are manifested from the subtle form. And this transmigration will also be discussed a little bit more in subsequent verse. Okay, verse 35. Nabhashashabdatanamatra kalagatya vikurvataha sparsho bhavat tato vayu swaksparshaya cha sangraha. From ethereal existence, which evolves from sound, the next transformation takes place under the impulse of time. And thus, the subtle element touch, and hence the air and sense of touch become prominent. So first came sound. From sound comes ether. Now from ether comes touch. And touch is the subtle element of air. Air is the gross element. Touch is the subtle element. And the sense that perceives it is skin. Skin is what perceives touch. So from so it said in due course of time, the subtle forms are transformed into gross, and the objects of touch and tactile sense are developed. So so this same thing has been explained twice before. It's been explained in the second canto, 9th chapter, and the third canto, 9th chapter. So this is the third time this is being described, and the descriptions, of course, are consistent. So in the second canto, 9th chapter, the descriptions are a little bit more elaborate there. Verse 36. Mriddutvam katinatvam cha saityam ushanvatam eva cha etad sparshasya sparshatvam tanmatram nabhasvataha. Softness and hardness and cold and heat are the distinguishing attributes of touch, which is characterized as the subtle form of air. So we saw in the previous verse that the subtle element touch manifested. This verse talks about the qualities of touch. And 4 qualities are described: softness and hardness, and cold and heat. And touch is the tanmatra of air. It is the subtle element of air. So Prabhupada says tangibility is the proof of form. So when we touch something, we know it has a form. And when it has a form, then we should be able to see it. So that is how touch is now going to reveal the next transformation, which is light, that enables us to see. Verse 37. Chalanam yuhanam praptir netravam dravya shabdayaha sarvendriyamatmatvam vayu karma bhilakshanam. The action of air is exhibited in movements, mixing, allowing approach of to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for proper functioning of all other senses. So we had said that the touch is the subtle quality of air. So the characteristics of air is being described over here. That air will connect the senses with their object. And therefore it is said that it brings life to senses. It provides movements, as we can see that the branches of the tree moving when there is wind. It causes association. It causes cohesion, that the air can force things together and it can disperse them also. and it brings the sense objects such as sound and coldness or fragrance to the organ such as ear, skin, or nose. So it should be understood, and this is Vishwanath Chakravarti's commentary, that movement, association, and bringing the sense object to the senses are all particular types of conjunctions or prapti. It is only by the action of the air that the body moves, the air circulates. And when that is impeded, and this is when the air in the body, the air circulation in the body is impeded, then many diseases result: paralysis, nervous breakdown, madness. So the basis of Ayurvedic treatment is to cure the improper movement of air. So Prabhupada says that if the air circulation is stifled, then sound will not carry. So this is a little bit, it's interesting and confusing that we know that sound carries in air, but we also say that sound is a quality of ether. And there is some discussion on that. So there is a difference between the relationship between the tanmatra and the bhuta, between the element and its quality, and between what is enabling that element. So while sound is a quality of is a subtle quality of ether, but it needs air to move. So we know that we have done experiments that if there is vacuum, sound will not move. That means it needs sound to move. So Prabhupada says we hear sound because of air circulation. So and then he says the ability to detect odors is also the action of air. So this is the quality of air of bringing the senses and their objects together. Now, not all, because we can see without air, but at least in terms of smelling and hearing, air has that quality. Okay, so I'll do this verse, and after that I'll pause and see if there's any discussion. Vayuscha sparsha tanmatra rupam devrita dabhut samohetam tatastejas chakshurupapalambhanam. By interactions of the air and the sensation of touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such forms, there is fire, and the eye sees different forms in color. So this verse is talking about the appearance of form from the sensation of touch. So Srila Prabhupada had given in the previous purport, he had said that, or the previous purport, he had said that when you touch something, that means it has form, and if there is form, then you will need sight to see it. So that is one way of understanding. This verse talks about it, and again, this is talking from the perspective of transmigration, that or the verse is understood in two ways. One is the way that Srila Prabhupada has explained, and a more specific analogy could be that if there is a person who is blind, then form is revealed by touch. Right? If the person is blind, then they will touch and they will feel and they will understand what the form is. So it is a form of seeing there. So the next evolution is the actual ability to see that form. The touch gives a sense of the form. The sight gives the ability to actually see. So in the lower species of animals, they see by touching. They really don't have an eye organ. Most of these, like the earthworms and the lower insects, they're not able to see. They don't have eyes, but they have feelers, and through the feelers they are touching, and that's how they see. When the species become more advanced, then the ability of sight to actually see the form appears. The second point this verse talks about is that through the process of transmigration, one can understand how touch gets transformed into form. So touch is the quality of air. So let's keep that in our mind. So now we are talking about air. Now, under the rules of transmigration, a soul gets another body based on destiny and desires. So destiny is my karma, desires is my mental conception. That if I did good activities, then I'm able to I have access to more choices in terms of what I would like my next form to be. So the person may desire to get the form of a demigod, or the person may desire to get the form of a human. So if the karma is there. So these are the other two things. Then the mental conception, or the desires, in verse 34, it has been said, already explained, that it is carried by ether. And the karma is buried into our subtle body. And the subtle body is carried by pran. It is carried by air. So when the subtle body enters into a gross body, then we have 10 life airs. They tie the subtle body to the gross body. The jiva, the soul, is within the subtle body, but the subtle body is material. And when it enters into a gross body, then these are the 10 bindings that bind the subtle body and the soul to the gross body. When the person dies, then these prans, they disengage. And they are the ones that carry the subtle body to the next gross body, and they engage over there. So in this way, we can see that by the influence of air, which is pran, form is created. That we change from one form to another. So form in this case is gross body. So we change from one gross body to another because of the influence of pran. Because pran carries the subtle body from one gross body to another. So we can understand that through the influence of air, we are able to change forms. Okay, so I'll pause over here, see if there are any comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, in this point which we just discussed about the influence of air from one form to the other, is time also involved in this? Maybe we may see later.
You mean in the
time
transmigration from
transmigration? Yeah.
It's the causal element. So time causes, under the influence of time, one dies. But based on what these verses are saying and what's said in chapter 14, that once the person dies, then he's just driven by destiny and desires. These are the two things. Destiny is what does your karma have in store with you?
Yep.
And desires is what is it that you want. So it is essentially the intersection of these two.
So my point is that pran will stay for a certain time, or it will transmigrate into any body.
So a couple of ways to understand this. Again, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when there is a new body that is ready for the soul, then it leaves the existing body and goes into it. Now, the new body may well be a subtle body. So sometimes when people read that, they think that the soul is transmigrating from, like, let's look at it from a more shorter perspective, that somebody dies and they immediately take birth again as a human in some other place, or an animal, or a demigod some other place. That might happen, but we also know that there is the Pitraloka. And in the Pitraloka, the souls have no gross body, but it's still a body. They have a subtle body. The subtle body is physical. That's the body that they get. And they reside over there. So how long do they stay between the two is again a confluence of destiny, desires, and in case of Pitraloka, it's the third element that comes is the of the oblations from the descendants, which in a way is part of destiny. But typically speaking, we say that transmigration is dependent on these two things, destiny and desire.
Prabhuji, I just want to clarify that the subtle body was from the existing body, right? Like you mentioned, if the other subtle body is ready for the person, then the soul may go to that. But the subtle body usually accompanies from the present body.
Correct. So not the other subtle body. When the other body is ready, the idea other gross body is there. Now, in case the person does not have a gross body, then that's the situation, that he has no gross body there. But you're right. The subtle body, it is, as long as the jiva is conditioned, the jiva has a subtle body, the same subtle body. So it stays from the time that the jiva falls to the material world, and it stays, the same subtle body stays till the time that returns to the spiritual world. So that the subtle body essentially is that which is your, it is carrying all the impressions from the samskars, the swabhav. So all that we have done, the karma, the reactions of the karma, the confluence of the modes. The soul is spiritual. It has nothing to do with all this. So all these are being carried by the subtle body from one gross body to another. Okay, so if there are no further questions, you can go to verse 39. Dravya kritvam gunata vyakti samsthatvam cha tejastvam tejasa sadvi rupamatrasya vrityaha. My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. So the previous verse talked about how form comes from air. Now, the qualities of form are being described. So form, it gives shapes to the objects, and it is perceived by the secondary aspects, the secondary qualities of the object. So sound is perceived independently, but perception of form is not an independent quality. Why? Because it needs for the object to be present. So sound, we said that even if the person cannot be seen, sound can be perceived, but not so in the case of form. And what does form allow? It allows for the perception of the shape and the size of the objects. And therefore form is more gross than both sound and touch. And form is the tanmatra, or it is the subtle quality of Agni or fire. Verse 40. Dhyatanam panchanam panam adanam himmamardanam tejaso vritiyastveta shoshanam kshuttatradevacha. Fire is appreciated by its light and by its ability to cook, to digest, to destroy cold, to evaporate, and to give rise to hunger, thirst, eating, and drinking. Okay, so from form comes fire, and the qualities of fire are described over here. That it provides light and heat. The light is to see the form, and the heat is used to impact hunger, eating, and cooking. So by heat, one becomes thirsty. By heat also, it causes rain, which is linked to drinking. And then there is the fire of digestion. And Prabhupada says that Ayurveda talks about and the fact that the fire of digestion is the one that actually helps to decompose, to break down what we have eaten. And if the fire of digestion is weak, then we may eat all kinds of food, but the fire will not be able to digest it. Next verse, 41. Rupamatra vikurvana tejaso devachodita rasamatram abhutasmat ambujiva rasagraha. By the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue, which perceives taste, is also manifested. So from form, now, by the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the element taste is produced. So fire has been linked with eating. So, and eating is linked with taste. So we can see that how this progression is happening. Now, what is the future further progression? That the process of tasting is based on saliva, and hence from taste, water appears. So taste is the tanmatra of water. And the Gyanendriya linked with it is tongue, which perceives the taste. Verse 42. Kashaya madurastikta katvamalliti naikada bhautikānām vikārena rasa eko vibhidyate. Although originally one, taste becomes manifold as astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty due to contact with other senses. So the qualities of taste are being described, that although taste is one, but it is there. So in the verse, in the translation, Srila Prabhupada says pungent, sour, and salty. So salty is not there in the Sanskrit of the verse, and Srila Prabhupada adds it for completeness. So Vishwanath Chakravarti also makes, not in this context, but in other contexts, he makes this point that sometimes things are assumed by the speaker. So then it is okay to extrapolate. That's what Srila Prabhupada does. So the taste. So it is said that although originally one, and the question comes that what is the original taste? And the understanding that is given is that the original taste is that of sweetness. But by the combination of the different material elements, it then gets divided into astringent, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty. So it's also interesting to note that based on the scientific observation, there are 5 taste groups that are recognized, and which is sweet and salty and sour and bitter. The 5th taste group is called unami. And the reason I say it's interesting is because the 5th taste group, unami, which was only recognized in 1908, and it's been there in the Bhagavatam right from the beginning. So when I was reading this, I was reflecting on that many times we say that Bhagavatam does not reconcile with what we know scientifically, but we also know that science, it makes advancements and discovers more. So the Bhagavatam was already talking about the taste group, and it was only in like I said, in the 20th century that the unami taste is it probably maps to astringent over here, the kasya taste. And for those of you who like Chinese food, unami taste is strong in there. So it's the taste of like soya sauce, the taste of tomatoes is unami. There was a Japanese scientist actually who discovered this taste, and then he started manufacturing this monosodium glutamate, MSG, which has this unami taste. And in Chinese cooking, it intrinsically has also, but they add MSG for this unami taste. Also interesting to see that in this taste group, spicy taste is not there. Neither in conventional scientific understanding or nor in the Bhagavatam understanding. It's astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty. And the reason that is explained is that so the reason some particular sensations are called taste, because they activate the taste receptors on the tongue. And spicy food, it does not activate any taste receptor in the tongue. So that's why it's not considered to be a taste group. Actually, what it activates is pain receptors. And so we sense spicy food. Now, for some people it's painful, a lot of people it's not. But just on the basis of science, the taste buds on the tongue, they do not sense spiciness. And again, it was interesting to see that even the Bhagavatam does not acknowledge it to be one of the taste groups. Okay, verse 43. Kvedanam pendanam tripti pranapayananandanam tapapanandu bhuyastvam ambhaso vritiyastvamaha. The characteristics of water are exhibited by its moistening other substances, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing by slaking thirst. So we know that the gross element of taste is water, or the subtle element of water is taste. So we had said that tasting is done through the production of saliva, and that's how Prabhupada said that the next bhuta comes. And this verse talks about the qualities of water, that it moistens other substances. Prabhupada says, like you can dough or mud, you can mix it with water, and it moistens it, and it coagulates it also. So you can give it shape through that. It causes satisfaction. So if you're thirsty, it's causing satisfaction. Maintains life. So we know that without water, we will not survive for a long time. Generally, it is said that one cannot survive for more than 3 minutes without air, and 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So it's more of a anecdotal thing. I don't know if it is scientific, the 3 threes. But I know for a fact that people have lived for more than 3 weeks without food. People have lived up till 8 weeks without food. And Prabhupada writes that actually water can also drive away starvation. That if somebody is not eating, then starvation can be mitigated by drinking. That to some extent, you can't, of course, survive for a long time, but it can be mitigated by drinking. Okay, verse 44. Rasamatra vikurvana ambaso deva chodita gandhamatra mabhutasma prithvigrahanastu gandhaga. Due to the interaction of water with its taste perception, the subtle element odor evolves under superior arrangement. Then the earth and the olfactory sense, by which we can variously experience the aroma of the earth, becomes manifested. So this is saying that from taste comes water, and then water, by the influence of time, gets transformed to smell, and the gross form of smell is earth, and the sense organ that perceives smell is nose. Yeah, verse 45. Karambapu tisaurabhya shanto grama ladabhipratha dravyavya vaishamyada gandha eko vividyate. Odor, although one, becomes many, as mixed, offensive, fragrant, mild, strong, acidic, and so on, according to the proportions of associating substance. But just like we said that the original taste is sweetness, the original odor is considered to be that which emanates from earth. Now, earth, specifically it is said that when rain falls on earth, then the odor that comes is considered to be the original odor. We don't smell that much in this country for some reason, but in India you do. When the monsoons, especially when the first rain falls and the earth is dry, then a very pleasing odor comes. And then in the verse it is said, then when it gets mixed, then it becomes these different kinds, offensive. And Prabhupada says bad odors is perceived with in filthy places. And then good odors is perceived from camphor, menthol, and similar other products. Pungent smells are perceived from garlic and onions, and acidic smells are perceived from turmeric and similar sour substances. Verse 46. Bhavanam brahmana sthanam dharanam sadvisheshanam sarvasattva guno veda prithvivritvi lakshanam. The characteristics of the functions of earth can be perceived by modeling forms of the Supreme Brahman, by constructing places of residence, by preparing pots to contain water, etc. In other words, the earth is the place of substance for all elements. So now the qualities of earth is being described. It is used to form the deity forms of the Lord. And the characteristic of earth is that it is indifferent to the qualities of other objects, in the sense that the pot will shape the form of water, but not the other way around. Now, we can also say that if you mix water with earth, then you can shape it. The shaping there is done more by somebody else. It's not the water that is shaping it. So that is why I said it is the cause of distinguishing other elements such as sky. It causes manifestation with distinction. So the other quality is that through form, one can distinguish between man and woman. One can distinguish between animal and humans. One can distinguish between a building and a car. So it causes distinction in various manifestations. Verse 47. Namo guna visheshartho yasya tachro pramuchyate vayur guna visheshartho yasya tatsparshanam viduhu. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile senses. So we have already spoken about the senses. Lord Kapila is repeating it for further elaboration, but in the relation to the sense objects, we had already spoken of the senses. At this point, Lord Kapila, he's going to be connecting three things. He will connect the gross element, the bhuta, with the subtle quality, the tanmatra, and with the gyanendriya, with the sense that perceives it. Like the quality of earth is smell, which is perceived by nose. The quality of air is touch, which is perceived by skin. So he will establish this connection between these three categories of elements. Tejo guno visheshartho yasya tachakshurujyate Ambo guna visheshartho yasya tadrasanam viduhu bhumer guno visheshartho yasya sagrahanuchyate. The sense whose object of perception is form, the distinct characteristic of fire is the sense of sight. The sense whose object of perception is taste, the distinct characteristic of water, is known as the sense of taste. Finally, the sense whose object of perception is odor, the distinct characteristic of earth, is called the sense of smell. So three more elements are being connected, that form, fire, and sight. The fire is the gross element, form is the subtle, and sight is the sense that perceives it. Similarly, water is the gross element, taste is the subtle element, and tongue is the element that perceives it. And then finally, earth is the gross element, smell is the subtle element, and nose is the sense organ that perceives it. Verse 49. Parasya drishyate dharmo haya parasmen samanvayat ato vishesho bhavanam bhumam evapalakshyate. Since the cause exists in its effect as well, the characteristic of the former are observed in the latter. That is why the peculiarities of all the elements exist in earth alone. So further details have been provided that when these elements evolve from one another, they carry the quality of the previous elements. So, for instance, the element of so sound is the cause of sky. Sky is the cause of air. Air is the cause of fire. Fire is the cause of water, and water is the cause of earth. So earth is the final result, but within earth is carried the qualities of water, fire, air, and ether. So it's not that the qualities are lost, but each of the quality of the cause is carried in the caused, and this happens successively. So we say that air has the quality of touch, but air has also the quality of sound, because ether has the quality of sound, and ether is the source of air. Similarly, we say fire has the quality of form, but fire also has the quality of sound and touch. You touch fire, you get burned, and when there is fire burning, there is the manifest sound that is coming. Similarly, water, it has the quality of touch, but it has also the qualities of, water has the quality of taste, but it also has the quality of sound, touch, and form. And similarly for earth. So from verses 33 to 49, we have described 10 things. Not we, Lord Kapila has described 10 things. He has described the 5 tanmatras and the 5 panchabhutas. He has talked about sound and ether, touch and air, form and fire, taste and water, smell and earth, and also the characteristics and how they evolve from one another. So this is also summarized. I won't go through it again. I've summarized it in a table that you have, and that in one place it gives you the summary of these 17 verses that are talking about these 10 qualities. Okay, so I'll do So my aim is to finish this chapter in the next discussion, so that from the next week we can start. We can do our discussion on the end-to-end creation. So I know that there's 10 minutes left. So I'll do maybe a couple of more verses and then pause to see if there's any discussion. I'll be kind of, the next 4 verses go together, but I'll take 2 verses and then pause after that. So verse 50. Etanya samathyayada mahadadini saptavai kalakarma gunopetu jagatadi rupavishat. When all these elements were unmixed, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of creation, along with time, work, and the qualities of the modes of material nature, entered into the universe with the total material energy in 7 divisions. So this is now taking us to the next stage of creation. So the earlier stage of creation was there was Pradhan. Now within the Pradhan, by the will of the Lord, these elements manifested. So we talked about the change of the Pradhan into Ahankar, and then Ahankar into Karma, into Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. Now we are going to be talking about the second transformation of Ahankar, which is Karya Shakti. So earlier on we were talking about Dravya Shakti. How did the material elements come? How did they emerge from Pradhan? Because remember, Pradhan was unmixed. There is nothing there, only the potential of it, but nothing there. So by first influence, the Dravya Shakti appeared. Now in 4 verses, Lord Kapila will describe Karya Shakti. So the Karya Shakti is essentially the 10 indriyas, the 5 Jnana Indriyas and the 5 Karma Indriyas. Now, Jnana Indriyas were mentioned in the previous verse, but they actually come in the category of Karya Shakti. They actually come in the category of Ahankar in the mode of passion. They're mentioned over there for the sake of completeness, because when you talk about there is substance, quality, then the sense is also mentioned there. But the substance and quality are in the mode of ignorance, and the ability to perceive it is in the mode of passion. So the first part of the verse, when all these elements were unmixed, then along with time, work, and qualities, he entered the universe. The Lord entered the universe. This is a recap. So this is not to indicate that this happened at this point of time. Because when the Lord entered, that's when the elements started coming. The reason that the Pradhan became distilled amongst the various elements is because of this very reason, that he entered along with time, work, and the modes of material nature, because Pradhan otherwise would not change. So the verse over here, because Lord Kapila has spoken for a while about subsequent transformations, this is a recap. He's saying that, remember, this is what's going on, that the Lord has entered. This is essentially the glance of Mahavishnu. Okay, there's a fairly lengthy explanation to this, which I am not going to do at this point, because I think we will cover this later on. But again, like I said, because this is a recap, there is a recap of the explanation also. I'll do one more verse, and after that we'll pause. Verse 51. Tatastena nuvidhebhyo yuktebhyo andamachetanam uthitam purusho yasma udatishadasau virat. From those 7 principles, roused into activity and united by the presence of the Lord, an unintelligent egg arose, which appeared to be the celebrated cosmic being. So this is now talking about the further conversion of the Mahatattva. So there was Pradhan, then the Lord entered it. He entered it with the modes and time and the desires. And because of that, the Pradhan became Mahatattva. Now, from the Mahatattva, the Brahman is appearing. So this verse actually summarizes 2 activities, not only the appearance of the Brahman, but also the appearance of the Virat Purush. So he says that from which appeared the celebrated cosmic being. So these verses, they are not meant to give a detailed step-by-step. They're talking more about milestones, because between the Brahman and the appearance of the Virat Purush, many things happen, but it's not mentioned over here. So it is said the Brahman appears, and from the Brahman, the Virat Purush appears, which is correct. But there are also intermediate steps here. So Lord Kapila is summarizing over here. The 7 principles, I think, are mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, that the 7 principles are the Panchabhutas, Mahatattva, and Ahankar. So it said the total material entered into the universe with the 7 divisions. And and again, so to explain the why, so we have said that the Pradhan is 24 elements, right? So we talked about the development of Pradhan into 24 elements. Now we're suddenly talking about 7 divisions. So this is where I was making this point, that we'll see the counts change. And then later on, when the counting is done within the universe, then it changes to 23. So it's essentially the same. Nothing has changed underneath. It's just the way of looking at it that has changed. So like now the 7 is basically the 5 material elements, and then Mahatattva. Mahatattva can be now considered to contain all the other elements. The remaining, if you remove Ahankar and the 5 material elements from the Pradhan, then you can consider this Mahatattva to contain the other elements. Now, why does it change there? Little bit of understanding there is that it's kind of like let's assume you have 10 food items, and then you can say that I have 5 food items that are sweet and 5 that are salty. Or you can say I have 2 food items that are liquid and 8 that are solid. Or you can say I have 3 cooked food items and 2 uncooked items and 5 deep fried items. So they're all pointing to the same 10 food items, but the manifestation is changing little differently based on the way that you perceive it. So we should keep that in mind so that we don't get confused later on when we see different counts that are coming up. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm almost out of time, but if there's any questions or comments, I'll be more than happy to take them. Okay, if not, then we will pause here. Like I said, we have a little over 20 verses left. I feel we should be able to comfortably finish them next week. And then we'll take a little bit of break from going through the chapter verse by verse, and then have a discussion on Sarga, Visarga, etc. And then we'll resume from chapter 27. Vanchakalpatarubhayaschet kripa sindhubhya eva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.